Today's daf we're going to be learning is Ketubot, daf tzadi aleph. This is the daf for Yom Kippur. Wishing everybody a Gemara Chatima Tova. Today's daf is sponsored by Gita and David Neufeld in loving memory of Marvin Stoker, Meir ben Aryeh Leib Halevi, Alav Shalom. Marvin was our honorary Zaidi, a role model in his love of Eretz Yisrael, Torah, and our dear Rabbi friend. He was so proud of learning the daf in Yerushalayim, and our learning be a schut and a source of nachat for his neshama. We're going to get started now with from the bottom of Tzadi Amud Bet. What we saw yesterday was the machloket between Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva about whether we have a man who was married to two wives. First, he was married to first he was married to Leah, then Leah dies, then he marries Rachel. He could have married Rachel even when Leah was alive. It doesn't really matter. But after he marries Rachel, he dies. So now, the sons of Leah want to get the ketuba nindichrin, which is in the event that she doesn't get the ketuba because she died first. The husband promises, and this is in order to get the father to give a better dowry, that in the event that he dies after her, her sons will get the inheritance. Instead of splitting the inheritance evenly between all the brothers, they'll get the part that she brought in, right? The ketuba, whatever she was deserving of the ketuba, the tosefet, the money she brought in, all of that is going to go to her sons. The second wife, her sons get the ketuba. She got the ketuba, but the problem is she didn't get it in her lifetime. She didn't collect it. She should have gotten it because he died first. But they want to collect her ketuba. So there's a whole debate. They clearly get the ketuba, that for sure. The question is, does ketuba nindichrin work in this case? And then we discussed, right, it depends whether there's any money left, or possibly depends on whether there's money left over. Meaning, if Leah's ketuba was 500 and Rachel's ketuba was 200, so Rachel's children get the 200. Let's say all you have is 700. So the question is, can they claim all the 700 for themselves? And Rachel's children end up with just the 200 of their ketuba, and that's it. They don't really inherit anything. So because that might cause arguing between them, right, one of the opinions is, no. Rabbi Akiva says we're worried it's going to cause arguing. They're going to say we didn't get any inheritance. We only got the ketuba, but we never got inheritance. And Ben Nanas says, and basically he's worried about right. And according to Ben Nanas, he said, right? They can say, you got the Leah sons can say, you got your ketuba, and we get our ketuba nindichrin. We don't care that you don't get inheritance, you got your ketuba. So then we had a bunch of options for what exactly the debate is. Is it whether there's ketuba nindichrin in this case or not? To which we tried some other suggestions. Comes Rav Yosef and he says, listen, we have a braita with this exact same thing, and it seems to be the exact same machloket, and it seems to be the machloket is there ketuba nindichrin or is there not ketuba nindichrin? So we're going to start with that braita. Hane Tnai, we're starting 7 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Amud Bet. Titanya, Nasata Rishona v'Meita, Nasata Shnia v'Meitu. Right, he married Rachel, she died. He married the second one. Sorry, did I say it right? He married Leah, she died. He married Rachel, and then he died. Ba'im banei shel zola achar mitav v'notzlo ketubat iman. Rachel's children come and get their ketuba. Period. Sounds like Leah's children don't get anything. Rabbi Shimon Omer, im yesh motar dinar. If there's an extra dinar left, elu notin ketubat iman ve'elu notin ketubat iman. If there's 701 left, according to our example, then they'll get their mother's ketuba and they'll get the ketuba nindichrin, and then the one will be split evenly between the brothers, because then at least, right, we talked about this yesterday, ketuba nindichrin is a takana of the rabbis. That can't override Torah law of inheritance. So therefore, only if there's laws of inheritance that apply, at least to a dinar that gets split evenly, then we're okay. V'imlav, but if not, then they have to split it evenly. My la bakamiflage, is this not the root of the machloket? Demar savar chapachayav chamoto yesh lam ketuba nindichrin. Umar savar chapachayav chamoto ein lam ketuba nindichrin. Isn't that the exact same machloket? According to at least one of the ways of understanding Ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva. Lo, not necessarily. You could say that everybody thinks in general there's ketuba nindichrin. It's just a matter of how do we calculate this dinar? What kind of dinar do you need? A dinar of what? Marsavar, afilu metaltale. When Rabbi Shimon says, if there's a dinar, what he means is even if it's a movable property. I don't care if it's movable land, which Tanakama says only if it's land. If it's not land, it's not considered a motar dinar, and they don't get their trubin in dichrin. Umi matzidamar hachi. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. We're going to have altogether, I think it's 4 or 5 explanations of this braita. Okay, we'll count as we go along. This was explanation number 2 of the braita, was the machloka between Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon. Is there trubin in dichrin in this kind of a case? One died when he was alive and one died after him, or not? Second option, can we collect it even if there's a dinar of karka, or only, even if there's a dinar of metaltadin, that's Rabbi Shimon, or only if it's karka, and that's Tanakam, only if it's land. But the problem with saying that is, you can't say that, because Hatanan, it says in the Mishna, our next Mishna, Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu yesham nechasim she'en lahem acharayut enam klum, ad sheyesh sham nechasim sheyesh lahem acharayut yeter al shtei ketubot dinar. Even if you have nechasim that don't have acharayut, that means movable property. Even if you have movable property, it's nothing. It's only if you have nechasim sheyesh lahem acharayut, you need to have a dinar's worth of land. Yeter al shtei ketubot dinar, meaning you need a dinar extra beyond whatever amount he has to give to the 2 ketubas. So if in our case, Leah was owed 500, Rachel was owed 200, right? Leah's sons, Rachel's sons were owed 200, and there's exactly 700. And if it was a dinar more in movable, it doesn't make a difference. It has to be a dinar more in property in order to be able to collect. So you can't say that that's Rabbi Shimon, because that disagrees with what Rabbi Shimon says in the Mishnah. So third option for the machloket, they're arguing about a dinar of value that was liened to some other property, meaning the father died. He had 701 in his possession, but one of them was owed to somebody else, right? It was liened, it was land, and it was liened to some other loan. So then, again, Mar, which is Tanakama, who was more strict, Savar mibnei chorin in mimashab lo, has to be from free land, not land that was liened. Umar Savar afilu mimashab. And when Rabbi Shimon says, if there's motar dinar, then what he means is even if it's liened. Well, the problem with this, and also the problem with explanation number 2, this was explanation number 3, is that Rabbi Shimon Omer, listen to his language, im yesham motar dinar, if there is a motar dinar. Now, that language sounds like he's more strict and not more lenient, because he's saying only if there's a motar dinar. But if you wanted to say he's being more lenient and saying any kind of motar dinar, even this, even that, he should have used the language kevan sheyesh motar dinar, since there's a motar dinar, even though the other guy doesn't think that's enough, even though it's lean, even though it's not land, right? We already rejected that one, but saying this would be a question on that as well. Mibaile, it should have used that language. So the language used really sounds like if there's a motar dinar, meaning he's more strict. If there's a motar dinar, yes, but otherwise, no. It sounds like he's being more strict than Tanakama, which is not how we understood him in the first place. But now we're saying the language really seems to say that way. So option 4. Ela b'pachot midinar kamifladim. Maybe they're arguing when there's less than a dinar of extra. There's extra, but it's not a full dinar. Mar savar dinar in pachot midinar lo. Tanakama says you have to have a dinar. And Mar savar Shmuel says afilu pachot midinar. Shmuel, when he says im yesham dinar, what he really means is even less than the dinar would be okay. Now, this, by the way, doesn't resolve the question we just asked. This raises the exact same question because, again, Rabbi Shimon's being more lenient, which doesn't sound like it from the language. Why they do that is a good question, but in any case, the Gemara is going to reject this and say you can't possibly say that Rabbi Shimon means less than a dinar because how Rabbi Shimon dinar kamar? He said if there's a dinar, which means he obviously needs to be a dinar. Otherwise, why would he have said that? And if you want to flip it and say maybe, this is option 5, which is to say, really the opinions are flipped. Rabbi Shimon is the one who's more strict, as we said, and Tanakama is the one who's more lenient. And Tanakama, and then we're going to flip it's actually really option 4. It's the reverse. I shouldn't actually say it's another option. It's saying that Rabbi Shimon is the one who says a dinar, and it's Tanakama who says less than a dinar. And that, by the way, resolves our issue of Rabbi Shimon looking like he's more strict. But what's the problem? Well, Rabbi Shimon and Tanakama match Rabbi Shimon and Tanakama in the next Mishna, which just seems to be arguing about a very similar situation. And there it says, Tanakama d'matnitin nami dinar kamal. The Tanakama in the Mishnah, where we just quoted Rabbi Shimon from that Mishnah, Tanakama from that Mishnah is the same as the Tanakama in this braita, and therefore, it can't possibly be that Tanakama doesn't need a dinar. They clearly need a dinar. They say so. So it can't be that one holds less than a dinar is okay and the other one doesn't, rejecting option number 4. We're going to go back to options 2 and 3, but a minor variation or maybe a major variation. What was our problem with those 2 options? That Rabbi Shimon, number 1, we had a problem if you say Rabbi Shimon says it's okay with metaltalin because he specifically says it's not. And the second one about him saying lean property is not, even lean property is okay. That would mean the language wouldn't match because he sounds like he's got the stricter approach. So if we flip the opinions, we resolve both those issues. It's not Rabbi Shimon who says it, it's Tanakama, so it doesn't disagree with Rabbi Shimon in the Mishnah. And Rabbi Shimon is the one who's being stricter. So we basically say it is mishuabad, not mishuabad, or land versus movable, but the opinions are the reverse. Amar Zutra mishmei Rav Papa. Now we're going to get a psak halacha on this issue that we've been discussing for a while now. If Leah died when he was still alive, and then Rachel died after his death, Leah's children can collect the ketuba din dichrin, and not only that, we saw this also yesterday, ketuba na'aseh motar lechaverta. It doesn't need to be 701 or more. It could even be 700 because Rachel's children got their ketuba. That's as if they inherited, and they got part of the inheritance, and we're not worried about there being some argument. So, Bishlama, right, we're not worried that's going to create a lot of friction between the brothers. So now the Gemara says, why did he need to say both the get ketuba din dichrin and ketuba na'aseh motar lechaverta? So, Bishlama, yesh minan achab chayav achab b'moto. Yesh lan ketuba din dichrin. If you just said the halacha is, in this case, achab chayav achab b'moto, they get ketuba din dichrin, and lo ashmi'ina ketuba na'aseh motar lechaverta, what would you have thought? Havamina, motor dinar ini lo, that it would all depend on if there's more than 700 in the account, right? If there's more than to cover both ketubot, then it would work, but not. That's why you needed to tell us also the ketubas na'aseh motar, the ketuba itself of the first brothers, the second wife, functions as the motar dinar, and functions as if they're inheriting, and therefore you can have ketuba din dichrin even if there's not more than a dinar's worth of both ketubot. But ela lishmin and ketuba na'aseh motar lechaverta v'ani yadana mishum de'achab b'chayav ve'achab b'moto yesh lan ketuba din dichrin. But if you told me the words ketuba can be a motar lechaverta, then I would know. It would be obvious that achab b'chayav ve'achab b'moto would have ketuba din dichrin because, right, what would happen here? The ketuba of the first one counts as inheritance, which means that the ketuba of the second wife of Rachel. First one I say because they're the first ones collecting, counts as motar, as the extra. And therefore, the sons of Leah, the first wife, can collect their ketuba din dichrin. So you wouldn't need to say the halacha is there's ketuba din dichrin in this case. To which they say no. We'll explain to you why we needed to say both. If you would have just said that, what's the whole issue of whether you have ketuba din dichrin or not? Are we worried about an arguing between the brothers, right? That we're going to have a whole World War III going on here between the brothers. So if you had just said the ketuba na'aseh motar lechaverta, we can find a case where there wouldn't be arguing, and maybe it's referring to a case like that, and not our case where there's clearly a concern for or there could be a concern for arguing. So now, in this case, there clearly won't be a concern for arguing. You'll see why in a minute. What if there were 3 wives altogether? So, okay, so let's say Leah and Bilhah, let's just assume Bilhah is a regular wife. Leah and Bilhah were married before, and then he died, so they both have ketuba din dichrin. And then and then the third wife, Rachel, who dies after he dies, yoledet nikevai. She only has daughters. Now, Why is this important? Because la bat Yerushai, because she doesn't have any rights to inherit. So when she's going to get the ketuba of her mother, that she gets. But beyond that, she has no claims to the inheritance. So now, in that case, what would we say? Ketuba nase motar lechaverta. Let's say she had 200, and then Leah's kids had 300, and Bilhah's kids had 200. So now Rachel's kids get their 200. Now we're left, and the estate only has, like before, 700. So we now have 500 left. It can be divvied up evenly between the two Ketubin Dichrim, between the sons of Leah and the sons of Bilhah. What's the issue? If you say there's no Ketubin Dichrim unless there's motar dinar, then you need motar. There is no motar. However, if you say ketuba naaseh motar lechaverta, there's two Ketubin Dichrim here. Each one can function as motar for the other. So they each could claim. So Leah's kids could claim 300. Bilhah's kids will only get 200. They won't split a 50-50. And there's no concern for an arguing here because they're each getting their mother's ketuba. It might be one gets a little less, but they're each getting ketubin and dichrin. It's not like the other case where they got their ketuba money, but now there's the inheritance. And ketubin and dichrin is a dividing of the inheritance. Rachel's kids are getting the actual ketuba that they're deserving of because the mother died. Once that's beyond, now there's inheritance and they want to inherit. In the case of the three, where Rachel's kids are out of the whole realm of inheritance, so they can't argue anything, the ketubin and dichrim will be split between the two brothers because it's just like regular inheritance. You get some, we get some, but we're going to get more because our mother had a larger ketuba. So that's why you could have thought the ketuba, now say motar lechaverta, would only be specifically in that case. And then you would have said, but our case that we've been discussing all along, and if Rachel had sons, then we'd be concerned about fighting, and maybe you wouldn't allow ketubin and dichrin in that case. Therefore, this halacha, this psikat halacha Zutra, in the name of Rav Papa, comes to teach you that in fact they do get it. New Mishna, which is connected but different. The both wives died, then he dies. And now we have two sons trying to collect their ketubin and dichrin, okay, two groups of sons. Yitomim mevakshim ketubat imam, ve'en sham ela shtei ketubot. Now, if there's exactly the same amount, right, let's say again, 500, 200, and there's exactly 700 in the estate, so cholki b'shaveh. They have to divide it equally because, right, even though we just said ketuba naaseh lechaverta, this Mishna doesn't hold that way. If there's extra, then they can each get their own mother's ketuba, because at least laws of Yerusha will happen normally between the one dinar that's left. But if the Yatomim come and say, we're going to inflate the value of our father's estate so that the ones who have the higher ketuba, the 500, want to get their amount. We're going to say that the father's estate is worth 701. We're going to inflate the value so that we could collect our stuff. Kadeshi it's ketubat iman, so that they could get their ketuba of their mother. Ain shomim them. Obviously, we don't listen to them because they're basically lying or exaggerating in order to mess up the other yatomim. We have to protect them. They should get the fair amount. Ela shaminat nechasim bebeitim. We bring it to the court and we don't allow them to assess it themselves. Hayusham nechasim bera'ui. What if it was exactly 700, but the father was owed some extra money from somebody, but they weren't enam kibbumuchsak? That's not the same as if they're actually there. The fact that someone owes him money, you never know if you'll collect or not. That's not considered part of the estate. Rabbi Shimon Omer, here's the Rabbi Shimon we quoted earlier. Even if they have some metaltalin over the value of 700, again, 700 is a random number I chose, it's not klum. You need 500 of one ketuba, the 200 of the other ketuba, plus a dinar. That will help you. Otherwise, no. Gemara comes and quotes a braita. Tanu Rabbanit, lizo elef, ulizo chamesh mel. So they bring their example of one has 1,000 and one has a ketuba of 500. Im yesha motar dinar, if there's 1,501, elu notzin ketubat imam, ve'elu notzin ketubat imam. They each get the ketuba of their mother. One gets 1,000, one gets 500. Imav yechalku b'shaveh. Not, they get equal. We already know this. It's just a braita stating the obvious. Now comes the Gemara and says, Pshita Mirubim v'nitma'atu. If it was worth 1,501, and then all of a sudden there was a decrease in value, but the father died, it was worth more, it had the dinar, then they already inherited, meaning regular laws of inheritance clicked in, meaning the ketubot in dichrin, everyone was able to get their ketubot in dichrin. So the ones of 1,000 already got rights to it. So the fact that now it went down in value doesn't really matter. But what if they were worth 1,500 and then they went up in value? So at the time of the death, it was only 1,500. There was no extra dinar. What do we do? So Tashma, let's learn from this situation. There was a nechasim of the house of the son of Tzartzur. They were muatim v'nitrabu. They were less, and then they became more. The sons came to Rav Amram, the ones who had the lower ketuba, and said, right, they were worried about losing all their money. At the beginning, they were supposed to get 50-50. Now, all of a sudden, they're only going to get their small ketuba rather than the brothers of the other mother who are going to get a much larger ketuba. Amar lahu zilu faisinu. You should go and negotiate with them because really they have rights and you don't. Okay, even though at the time of death, no, but since they're more than a dinar, you lose out. Lo eshkafu. They didn't want to listen to him. They didn't want to go start negotiating. Amar lahu. It's a good question. Why exactly he says this to them? Ilav mifaisitu lahu machina le besilva delo mabadam. If you don't go, I'm going to poke you with a needle that doesn't take blood out. Rashi explains what that means is I'm going to excommunicate you if you don't listen to me. Shadrinu l'kameda Rav Nachman. He sends them before Rav Nachman. I guess he doesn't know what to do with them. They're not listening to him. Amar lahem. He said to them, Kishem shemirubim v'nitma'atu. Now, we're going to go with Rashi and Rabbeinu Hanan here, and I'll just tell you that some people explain it the opposite. But Rashi and Rabbeinu Hanan are of the opinion that when they go to Rav Nachman actually tells them against Rav Amram. He tells them the opposite, that you actually have all the rights. Okay? He says to them, just like mirubim v'nitma'atu, if they were a lot and then, right, they were more, there was a dinar, and then it shrunk in value, it diminished in value, zachu b'hem yorshim. So whatever happened already happened, and they already got their rights, so we can't change anything. Also, the case of where they were not a lot, and then they became more, and they went up in value, it doesn't matter. Whatever happened, the yorshim already inherited their rights. So you already have rights, you don't lose those rights, okay? And they can't claim their ketubah b'din. Next. Haul Gavra, this is a siman for the stories that are coming up. We're going to have a whole bunch of stories. The first two are exactly the same, just different details of amounts of money and different details of which rabbis have what to say. Haul Gavra d'Abamaskal Beit Alpha Zuz. It was a guy who was owed 1,000 zuz. Havule Tre Apande. He had two palaces. Zavinu Chada b'chamesh meot, b'chada b'chamesh meot. He sold them both, but they were both lien to this loan. He sold them both for 500 zuz. Apparently, he sold them to the same person. Comes the guy we owe money to, the creditor, and he says, he goes to the guy who bought the land because the other person has no money. So he goes to the person who bought the land and he tries to take the land from him. The land is lien. Now, he didn't borrow money from him. He's the third party, right? But the Baal Chov says, look, this guy owed me money and you bought his land. His land was lien to me. I'm taking one of the lands. So first he took Hadaminai. He took the first palace. Then Hadar Kataraf Leidach. He goes to take the second. And the purchaser, the guy who bought the two properties, doesn't want to lose both properties. So what does he do? Shakal Alpha Zuza. He takes out 1,000 zuz in cash. Ka'azil Lagabe. And he goes to the guy who's about to take his land away. Amarle says to him, listen, if you don't want to get off my property, keep the one palace you took already, and that will be worth for you 1,000 zuz, and just say, this guy doesn't owe you any more money, and you're not coming after my property anymore. Vilo, but if you want the full amount, take the 1,000 zuz I have right now in my hand. Take the cash, give me back both my properties, right? Don't take the new one, and give me back my old one, and be done with it. Take your 1,000 zuz, I don't care, I'll give you 1,000 zuz, but leave my property out of it. So the question is, can he do this? So Sever Rami Barchama Lememar, Hainu Matniti. This is like our Mishna. Right? What did it say? The Yitomim say we're going to inflate the value. We don't listen to them. So he can't inflate the value of the first palace and say, take this first palace instead of the 1,000 dinar. It's only worth half. But comes Rava and Amarle, Rava Midami. You're comparing two totally different cases. So nothing to do with our Mishna. Hatam ilup sedeliatme. There, the atonement we're losing out. There, the orphans, if they inflate the value, it's going to take away from what the other orphans are getting. But hachami ilap seda alfe yahiv alfe shakil. In this case, there's no loss. And the person who's owed the money, he has a choice. He could take the full 1,000 zuz that this guy is offering him and get the whole value. So there's no loss to him. It's only he decides, I prefer the land, then he's basically saying the land is worth to me 1,000 zuz because I'd rather the land than have your money. So there's no loss, and therefore it actually should work. So the halacha is, it seems it works. The question is this. The person who bought, let's say that the creditor says, I'm going to keep the first land in place of 1,000 zuz. That land theoretically just doubled in value almost, right? It's now somewhat worth 1,000 zuz, although it's not really. So now what happens is like this. The person who lost the land, it wasn't his loan. He didn't owe the money. So he goes back to the person who sold him the property and says, listen, you had a guy you owed money to. I paid him back for you. Give me the money. How much money can he demand? Because in a sense, he got rid of his loan of 1,000, so it's worth 1,000. On the other hand, he's demanding back money for land of 500 zuz and not 1,000 zuz because he's only demanding back one of the properties. So that's the Gemara's question. Tirfa bakama katvina. When he goes to get the money back from the person who sold him the land, the person who had borrowed the money from the other guy, how much do we write? How much can he demand? Ravina Amar Ba'alfa. Ravina says he could get all 1,000 zuz because he basically saved this guy 1,000 zuz. Rav Avira Amar B'chamesh Mea. In the end, it was the land that was worth 500, and he's demanding back only one of the lands because the other property he still has. So only 500. In the end, you can really only demand. Halacha is 500. Another story. Like I said, exact same story, just different money, different characters. He had 100 zuz. He had two small plots of land. Each one he sold to someone else, right? The same person, presumably, for 50 each. Baal Chov came and took one of them. He wanted to take the second one. The guy comes out with 100 zuz. He says, if it's worth 200 zuz, you want my land, keep it. And that's it for the loan. If not, take 100 zuz and get off my property. Give me back my land. Rav Yosef Lememar, now instead of Rami Barchama, this time it's Rav Yosef, wanted to say, Hainu matnitin. Remember, you told me, you can't inflate the value. Amarle Abaye, instead of Rava, okay, here Abaye and Rava actually say the exact same thing. Midame, this is not the same. Hatami lup seda liatme hachamai pseda ilen. Me'ayav, me'ashak. There's no loss, and therefore he should get it should be fine. He shouldn't, this should be able to work. V'tir for become a katfinan, how much can the guy who bought the land demand back if the lender, the creditor, takes the land? How much can he go back to the original person who sold it to him? Ravina Amar b'mea, Rav Avira Amar b'chamishim, same machloket as before. B'hilchat b'chamishim, the halacha is he only gets 50. He can't demand 100. Another story, a bit different. He was owed 100 zuz. Shachiv, he died. Shavik katina da'ara. So the guy who owed money died. He left over a small plot of land. It was worth 50 zuz, half the amount. The Baal Chov comes and takes it. So the Yatomim come back and say, here's 50 zuz for my land back. Give me back my land. It's okay, I'll give you back your land. And now he says, okay, you now have land. Hadar katarifle. I'm going to take that land back because that land is linked to my loan. And now I got my 100 zuz back. And now they're stuck without land. So they went, Atu kamed Abaye. Remember, Abaye was an orphan himself. They go before Abaye. Amar lahem, mitzvah tomim lefroach chov avihem. It's a mitzvah for you to pay back your father's loan, where he's basically saying, first of all, what mitzvah is this? Rashi says it's part of kibud ava and respect for your parents is paying off their loans when they die. But the Beit Din will never enforce this, he basically says. So look, you came forth, you paid him the money, and that was a good thing you did. But he says, Hane kamai mitzvah abidatu. So the first time, right, when he took your land, that was for the mitzvah. Hashta kitarif bidin katarif. And you return that by giving him the money. So by giving him the money, you basically paid him back the 50 zuz that you owed him, that your father owed him. That was great. That was okay. That was fair and square. But then you got the land back. Now, when you got the land back, hashtaki tarif bidin katarif, he is still owed 50 zuz, and that land was worth 50 zuz. And sorry, but he did it legally, and there's nothing I can do for you. Now the Gemara points out, though, lahalacha, okay, practically speaking, it depends how you did this. And if they had done it in a smart way, they could have avoided this. How? Lo amaran, they didn't say this to lo amrule in a case, right? This is only because they didn't say the following. Lo amrule hane chamishun zuze demei da'ar katina. If they, right, they didn't say these 50 are to buy this land. Aval amrule, if they had said hane chamshin zuze demei ara katina, if they had said this 50 zuz is going to purchase this land, saluke salkoa, they could have done it. Why? In other words, this basically said the same thing twice. It just that they didn't say that, because had they said that, it would have worked. Once he buys the land is no longer liened to the property. Now, what did they do? They basically exchanged it and said, we're giving you back the 50, give us back our land, and then it reverts back to being land that was liened. But if they said, you took it for the loan, now I want to purchase that land from you, and they go and they make a sale and they purchase it from him, and they say, we're purchasing this land from you, then it's already, the shibu, the lien is gone. And therefore they can do that. They can buy it like a real sale, assuming he sells it to them, but assuming he'll sell it to them, they can buy it, get it back, and then he won't be able to collect from it anymore. Last story. He sold the rights to his mother's ketuba, his rights to his mother's ketuba. What are his rights? His rights are questionable whether he'll even ever have rights. But if the father dies or divorces her first, then she gets her ketuba money. Then she will, when she dies, he inherits her rights. Okay, or it could be right. The father will die first. The mother will die first, and he'll get it as ketuba in dichrin. But all those things, right? We just saw you might not always be able to collect ketuba in dichrin. There might not be money in the estate. What if the son dies first? Then of course there isn't. There's all sorts of possibilities that this wouldn't happen. So he sold it for tovat hana'ah, which means symbolic amount, not a lot of money. And he said, not only that, but Amrle, he said, if it turns out my mother objects to this, what I just did, then I'm going to take back the sale. Well, his mother died and he inherited the money, but but she didn't say I have any issue with this. But now comes the son and he wants to say, I don't want to do this sale. Well, can he or not? So at this point, right, earlier he couldn't have said, I don't want to do this anymore, I want to renege. But at this point, he basically takes his mother's place. He's basically coming in as if he's his mother, because he inherits it straight from the mother. So since he said, if my mother has any issue, and then he's in place of the mother, maybe he can take issue with it as well. That's what Rami Bar Chama wanted to say. So similar to the previous story, Rami Bar Chama wanted to say something, came Rava and disagreed. He might have not taken responsibility for her opinion and saying, oh, look, I don't know what my mother's going to think, and therefore I'm leaving this open. Maybe she'll disagree. But he obviously didn't leave it open for his own mind. He was clear he wanted to make a sale. That's why he had to deal with the guy. You can't come later and say, even though he's functioning as his mother, in the place of his mother, you can't possibly say that was giving me rights to renege on the deal. Of course not. That's ridiculous. And therefore Rava disagrees with him. With that, we're finished with today's daf. Gemara Chatima Tova to everyone. We'll meet up again tomorrow.